Hello friends. Operational situation at the front on the 7th of March. Let's talk in more detail today about the entire front line. We will start with you from the Kopinski direction of Sinkovka. We also talked about this yesterday on the evening broadcast, that the enemy is conducting attacking actions, assault actions, that he has now resumed offensive actions on Sinkovka as a whole, and from two directions. Well, we go directly to the Sinkovka itself. Footage was published by the AFU fighters of a strike on the positions of Russian troops. They are all in the north of Sinkovka. In its northern part, that is, the enemy maintains a presence. This is not yet a red zone, because there is no confident control on the part of the enemy, but as we see, he managed to come close to the advanced positions of the AFU. And accordingly, a gray zone has been added in this area. Previously, it was possible to stop Russian troops approximately in this area. Now we see that they managed to advance about 50 meters deeper. Therefore, the fighting continues. At the same time, we make an important remark, that, the last pastimes when the Russian troops managed to catch the APU in the north, they were knocked out. Therefore, we will look at how the situation will develop now, according to the situation. But in any case, we see that the enemy is pressing now in Sinkovka, after a pause. There are a number of distracting attacks. In the Kopinski direction, an attack was repelled south of Pershetravnovoy, or northwestern Orlianka. There was an attack along one of the forest belts, stopped within the red zone. But in any case, now the activity in the Kuplensky direction has increased recently, on the part of Russian troops. Therefore, most likely they will already be watching the Russian command, how the circumstances are developing in general, and can resume assault operations in the area of Tebayevka, so Kotlyárovka, Kislovka and Ivanivka. In any case, it is now coming to this, namely, to resume. Because activity as a whole, I repeat, throughout the Kupiansk direction. In the Limansky direction of Terny-Yampolovka, information is also being received from the enemy that they managed to approach the outskirts of Ternov. Before, they claimed that they had entered the thorns. This did not correspond to reality. We then sorted it out with you. The attacks are mainly carried out by Yar Laptev and the round beam, but there is no confident progress on the part of the Russian troops now. I would say the greatest activity, the decline of that activity, is observed approximately in this area. In other words, it is possible to approach, but the APU is also taking all necessary measures to prevent the advance and transfer of large forces to the forward positions. Therefore, we do not record significant changes in this sector of the front. We turn to Bologorovka, Luhansk region. A gray zone has been added, some clarifications, and we'll talk about this now. So there was an attack by armored vehicles. An armored vehicle was hit, a Russian one was destroyed, but this is already outside the gray zone. In other words, this is exactly the zone that was previously controlled by the APU, so we added a gray zone in this area. And based on where the Russian troops are attacking, respectively, the red zone along one of the defense lines, defensive structures. So, the situation for yesterday, the situation for today, red and gray zones. Well, because here you need to understand that there is no position of the armed forces of Ukraine. If Russian troops from two directions intersect at the intersection, clearly this area is behind them. We see that they do not abandon attempts, as we said, that there are assault actions not only from the industrial zone area, but also attempts to attack Bologorovka itself. Now we state the continuation of active hostilities and the fact that the situation is being further clarified, since with varying success. Vector so, it cannot be said that this is a chalk quarry, because now the impact on Bologorovka itself is more visible, based on those attacks from the industrial zone. That is, well, conditionally let's take the northern direction and east of Bologorovka itself. This is Bologorovka itself, not so much a waste heap. There were attacks on the landfill, but it was possible to repel them, so there are no changes there. Perhaps they are just trying to bypass the landfill, but here we will look at the situation. We are moving to the Bakhmut direction, Bogdanovka. Footage of a counterattack by the AFU was published online. It means counterattacks along the forest belt north of Bogdanovka. The situation remains with us for clarification. A number of our OSINTers have marked this area of the gray zone. Most likely it is. We are waiting for confirmation now, because there is no information when these shots were, when there was a counterattack. But the APU fighters actually managed to reach the T-shaped intersection. There is such a moment. Therefore, the situation for clarification, we have only commented on this point. As for Ivanovsky, fights with varying success. The main thing that the Russian command is doing now is betting on transferring manpower to Ivanovo itself as much as possible, and continuing large-scale assault operations, because now it is possible to contain the forces that were accumulated earlier by Russian troops in Ivanovo. But the main task, I repeat, is to transfer reserves in order to increase pressure. Because the fighting is really the hardest, shooting. Here it is necessary to add the point that they attack not only those who have previously conducted offensive actions on this sector of the front, but also the fighters of the Wagner PMCs as part of a tuning fork. The Akhmat tuning fork detachment, consisting of former PMCs Wagner, therefore, the enemy has quite serious forces here. That is why we see such an advance, which was in Ivanovo, but at the same time, we managed relatively, for now we will say, to stop the enemy, not to allow him to advance further, but he is accumulating strength. At the same time, the city of Yar is also being shelled, artillery and aerial bombs, as well as a number of neighboring settlements without significant changes. We are moving to the Avdeevka direction. According to Farts, we do not fix any changes. On the part of the enemy, there is also a statement that the AFU counterattacks on this sector of the front, and according to the latest information, quite successfully, because as we noted, the forest belt was moved to the gray zone, where there was a counterattack with the support of the Abrams tank, which unfortunately was hit as a result. But fresh footage was also published, where the APU is already counterattacking with infantry along the northern street. Therefore, there is a situation with varying success for both sides. Although again, there are a lot of attempts being made by Russian troops. It looks something like it was in the typical area, when there were assault operations for months, but we did not observe any significant changes. In other words, the main bet is just the same, going to exhaustion, well, and that it will be possible to advance in the neighboring area, as it was south of Stepovo, in order to already take Berdik. Now the main focus of the enemy is on the area of Orlovka, not only on Orlovka itself. There are a number of obstacles that prevent him from advancing to the western part, the northwestern part. Even more precisely, it is possible to counterattack, it is possible to discard somewhere. But now the enemy has shifted the blow a little, and we will talk about this. It means that on a front section up to 127 kilometers wide, he advanced to a depth of up to 500 meters. The situation looks conditionally as follows. We have said on previous broadcasts just yesterday that the vector of attacks here from a position south of the school was not so much on the Garden Partnership Dawn. We said that there are attacks in the direction of the field reservoir. But what did they do? They went south of the Zaryensky Stavka, that is, they went north of the abandoned field reservoir, then the Zaryensky Stavka, and, accordingly, what we talked about, they may try to bypass the positions of the advanced APU of the Styla. That is, without entering into a battle for the Garden Partnership, it was impossible to bypass it. Here, of course, supply remains, but still the enemy will be able to take under partial fire control the logistics chain, taking into account that, but here we need to look at more positions in the south. Therefore, there is such a moment. But now the second assumption is also being made, that they can move northward between Pansky and Zaryensky Stavka, if they succeed, along a small rather narrow area, in the direction of Yelikin Street, only the one that is already behind Zaryensky Stavka. And accordingly, try to interrupt the logistics chain, and already put pressure in the most serious, in Orlovka itself in the western direction. Naturally, the skyscrapers will remain. This is the worst option. We are now considering a section of the road about 0542, leading to Semenovka. Well, actually not the best positions for defense, but We are talking about what the most pessimistic scenarios are talking about now. But here it is still difficult to say how the situation will develop further, because we see quite effective counterattacks in the village of Bertici, and a similar situation in the area of the village of Toninkaya, where there was another attack by Russian troops. So they attacked along the forest belt. This is that according to the latest frames of the latest information that we see, it was possible to repel the attack. In other words, they are trying to break through the same way, but we do not see any significant changes. In other words, our line fluctuates throughout the day, so a dynamic situation with varying success. Therefore, now, I see an option that they will try to circumvent. Why? Because there is still an open area here, and if we are talking about the thin and suburban village of Don, there are positions in the Vodiane area of the Russian troops, and between the northern Vodiane, there are also a number of positions in the fields. Here are the forest belts from which attacks can be carried out. Therefore, I see more just the same stubbornly thin. Well, as they say, we will see. On May Day, the pressure does not subside. We have been talking a lot lately about this sector of the front, about this settlement, about what is happening between Vody and Pervomaysky. There are a number of attacks along the beam. We talk to you, the enemy's assault operations are continuing. The situation remains under further clarification, but the situation here is very complicated. Someone even transfers the central part of the western part to the gray zone. Well, as they say, we will see. The APU is now taking all necessary measures to stabilize the situation in this area. There are heavy battles going on. Nevelskaya without any changes. According to the wording, I did not have any information, which is quite strange, because no one has already reported specifics. In the context of 5 days, we will still expect drone footage, but most likely there was a stuffing from the Russian side, as I said. Well, this will already be shown by drone footage. Assault operations were also carried out on Georgievka by Russian troops. Let's start with it. They are already attacking not only with infantry, at the Harvest Garden Association in the western direction, in the direction of Centralnaya Street to the southwestern outskirts of the Georgievsky Stavka, but also with the support of armored vehicles. That is, the enemy is now very seriously conducting assault operations, so the battles, let's say for Central Street, have been started by Georgievka itself. If we talk about the positions north of the Georgievsky Stavka, there is also pressure from the Russian troops, but there are also a number of counterattacks being undertaken by the AFU. So, in order to deliver a flank strike, including, to prevent the Russian troops from stretching further. In other words, the goals of the Russian troops are extremely clear, but all necessary measures are being taken by the AFU to prevent this. The situation, we will say, is still controlled by the AFU, but the enemy is pressing on this sector of the front, both from the south and north of the Georgievka Stavka, in the direction of Georgievka itself. The Victory area continues assault operations in general. We have both to the south of Victory and to the north, without significant changes. Fights within the gray zone remain. On Novomikhailivka, I will also comment on the situation here. Yesterday, the enemy carried out assault operations, attacked, but not the vector that we assumed, that is, we talked with you, that they would make a very big bet on farm buildings to try to move along, so the trench of dugouts to the western part, southwest. But the enemy went with the support of armored vehicles to the west, the southwestern part. So Novomikhailivka managed to stop him. This is exactly the same thing that happened at the turn, but a gray zone has been added. The situation remains on clarification. So you counterattack the link, were able to discard it, but whether you were able to discard it to the original positions is unknown, and whether you regained control over those positions that were previously under their control and not in the gray zone. Everything here remains for further clarification. But as we can see, the enemy does not abandon his plans, still strike, surround, so to speak, create a semicircle, if not surround Novomikhailivka, due to the fact that there is a natural obstacle in the form of a cascade of stakes and the Novomikhailivka River, that is, to create conditions unfavorable in order to conduct defense in the center, so far it is possible to restrain. But even here, as you can see, there are heavy battles, because there are assault actions in Novomykhailovka itself, in the area of its central part, but at the same time they are already attacking the southwestern part of the settlement. We proceed to work on. Some clarifications have been added, but this is all a convention so far. Yesterday we added a gray zone with you, so the first position is at the T-shaped intersection, and the second one is northwest of Verbovoy. A red zone has been added, but I repeat it remains to be clarified, because there are roles from the Russian troops not only to the west of Verbovo, or between the work on Verbovo, but also on the work itself, including not only southeast but also west of the settlement. Russian troops carry out attacks as much as possible, taking into account that the situation that we have now means to distort the IFU forces as much as possible, to attack with the widest possible coverage, and accordingly to disperse artillery strikes, to disperse the efficiency of WALV operators in this sector of the front, and yet the main vector, and so goes in the direction of the US Panovskaya beam, based on where the Russian troops are attacking now.